Some locomotives were built to become national icons. Others were made to haul heavy freight, break records, and show the world just how far railroad engineering could go. But there is a special group that became famous for a very different reason: frustration. Can you imagine a massive, expensive, high-tech machine being rejected by the very engineers, shop crews, and railroads that were supposed to depend on it? On this journey, we are going through loud turbines, oversized engines, beautiful designs that were too impractical for daily service, and locomotives so ambitious they almost seemed bigger than the rails they were built to run on. Some were hated because they were complicated, others burned too much fuel, and a few simply arrived too early, in the wrong place, with the wrong idea. Stay with me until the end, because the number one machine on this list was not just rejected. It proved that sometimes, trying to reinvent the train can create one of the strangest and most controversial railroad machines in history. Union Pacific GTEL. Few locomotives managed to be as impressive and as annoying at the same time as the Union Pacific GTEL. In the 1950s, built by General Electric in the United States, it was created for Union Pacific with a bold mission: haul enormous freight trains using a gas turbine, something very different from the traditional diesel power that was taking over American railroads. Instead of a V-type or inline engine, it used a main turbine connected to generators, which powered electric traction motors on the axles. In the most famous versions, nicknamed Big Blow, it produced around 8,500 horsepower, enough muscle to drag extremely heavy trains across long western routes. It did not have a gearbox like a road vehicle. The system used electric transmission, with power distributed through motorized trucks and heavy railroad suspension, built to handle vibration, weight, and constant pulling force. It was huge, industrial, loud, and intimidating on the rails. In actual operation, the GTEL made sense when it was running steadily, pulling heavy freight across long distances. But in yards, switching moves, and idle time, the turbine kept burning a lot of fuel, even when it was not using its full power. For a railroad, that meant high costs and lower efficiency than expected. The problem was that all this power came with specialized maintenance and a level of noise that bothered a lot of people. The nickname Big Blow fit perfectly, because when that turbine came alive, it sounded like an entire factory was rolling down the railroad. Even so, the GTEL became a symbol of a bold experimental era in railroad engineering. It showed that horsepower is impressive, but it does not solve everything. And if this turbine already seemed excessive, the next locomotive proves that even a respected legend can hide a difficult side. Union Pacific Challenger 3985. Putting Challenger 3985 on this list may sound unfair to anyone who loves steam locomotives, but that is exactly what makes the story interesting. It was one of Union Pacific's great stars, admired by the public and respected by rail fans. But it was also a gigantic, expensive, and demanding machine to keep in service. Built in 1943 by the American Locomotive Company in the United States, it was born during World War II to haul heavy freight at speed. It used a 4-cylinder articulated steam engine, a 4-6-6-4 wheel arrangement, a massive boiler, and a tractive effort of about 97,000 pounds, roughly 44 tons of starting force on the rails. Its estimated output could exceed 5,000 horsepower in heavy service, depending on boiler conditions, fuel quality, and crew skill. There was no manual or automatic gearbox like in a road vehicle. The engineer controlled it through the throttle, the reverser, and experience, with power going to the driving wheels and an articulated front engine helping it handle curves. Visually, Challenger 3985 was almost hypnotic. The steam, the moving rods, the deep exhaust beat, and the giant presence could stop people in their tracks at any station. But that beauty had a cost. Constant maintenance, heavy water and fuel consumption, plenty of lubrication, and an operation that required a trained crew. After retirement from regular service, it returned to fame in Union Pacific Excursion Service, where it became a true star. But keeping a steam locomotive this large alive was never simple, which is why it spent long periods out of service. It proves that a legend can be loved by the public and feared by the shop crews at the same time. And if the Challenger already demanded respect because of its size, the next locomotive enters the list for being fast, luxurious, and too complicated for its own good. Milwaukee Road Class F7 Hudson. An elegant locomotive is not always an easy locomotive to maintain, and the Milwaukee Road Class F7 Hudson carried that exact contrast. Introduced in 1938 in the United States, it was built by the American Locomotive Company to haul fast, punctual passenger trains on the famous Hiawatha services. It used a two-cylinder steam engine, a 4/6/4 wheel arrangement, and huge driving wheels measuring about 84 inches in diameter. Its estimated output was more than 3,000 horsepower, with tractive effort around 50,000 pounds, close to 22 tons of starting force on the rails. There was no manual or automatic gearbox. Control came through the throttle, the reverser, and the skill of the crew. Traction came from the central driving wheels, with spring suspension and weight equalization designed for high-speed stability, not heavy freight work. From the outside, it was one of the most beautiful locomotives of its era, with streamlined styling, a low stance, and a long, sleek profile. But in daily railroad life, that beauty came at a price: demanding maintenance, harder access to mechanical parts, and a very specific role in fast passenger service. If you are enjoying this trip through some of the most controversial locomotives in history, go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell, because that helps this video reach more people who love classic machines and railroad history. The F7 became an icon of speed and elegance, but it also represented a sophisticated steam era that was becoming too expensive to keep alive. And if this locomotive already seemed too specialized, the next one shows how a small and fast machine can also become a headache. Mavag Class 242. Sometimes, the problem with a locomotive is not that it is weak, but that it is too specific for a world that demands versatility. The Mavag Class 242 appeared in Hungary in 1936, built for Magyar Államvasutak, the Hungarian state railways, with the mission of pulling light passenger trains with speed and elegance. The design used a two-cylinder steam engine with a 4/4/4 wheel arrangement, a rare setup focused on smooth running at speed. Its output was close to 1,000 horsepower, with a top speed around 75 miles per hour, enough for fast service, but with little margin for heavier trains. Like other steam locomotives, it had no manual or automatic gearbox. The engineer controlled power through the throttle and reverser, while traction was concentrated on the central driving wheels. Its spring suspension favored stability and comfort, not brute force for heavy-duty work. The look was clean, balanced, and elegant, with compact proportions and a refined appearance. But that same refinement became its limit. On routes where trains got heavier or the job demanded more adhesion, the Class 242 lacked the versatility of larger, simpler, and tougher locomotives. It was not a useless machine, but it became known as a design that was too specialized for a railroad that needed practical strength in daily service. The Class 242 feels like one of those ideas that looks great on paper, works well in the right setting, but suffers when reality changes. And if this Hungarian locomotive showed the risks of being too delicate, the next one was a gigantic electric drive experiment that promised far more than it could deliver. C&O M1. Few railroad bets were as ambitious and as badly timed as the C&O M1. It was born in 1947 in the United States, built by Baldwin Locomotive Works for the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway, with the promise of combining steam, turbine power, and electric transmission in a modern passenger locomotive. Inside, it used a steam boiler to feed a turbine, which drove electric generators. Those generators sent power to electric traction motors on the axles. Output was around 6,000 horsepower, a massive number for a passenger locomotive, with enough force to move long and luxurious consists. It did not have a manual or automatic gearbox. The system used electric transmission, with traction distributed through motors on the trucks, heavy railroad suspension, and an enormous overall structure, reaching more than 150 feet with the tender. In practice, it was almost an experimental power plant on rails, with a long, imposing look that was very different from ordinary locomotives of the era. The problem was that all this sophistication arrived at the wrong moment. The planned chassis passenger service never entered regular operation as intended, and the M1 lost the main purpose it had been built for. On top of that, it was expensive, complex, and hard to justify when diesel-electric locomotives were becoming simpler, more reliable, and more economical. The M1 became one of the great frustrations of the final American steam era. It did not lack power, presence, or ambition, but it lacked a real fit for the railroad world of that moment. It proved that a locomotive can be brilliant in concept and still become a burden for the people paying the bills. And if this machine already felt too big for its own destiny, the next one pushed the obsession with speed into even more controversial territory. PRR T1. The PRR T1 had everything it needed to become one of the great saviors of American steam, but it ended up being remembered for its difficult temperament. It appeared in 1942 in the United States for the Pennsylvania Railroad, built by Baldwin Locomotive Works and the railroad's own shops, as an attempt to keep steam competitive against the rise of diesel power. Its steam engine had 4 cylinders, a 4-4-4-4 wheel arrangement, and a duplex drive system, meaning 2 independent sets of driving wheels inside one locomotive. Estimated output was above 6,000 horsepower, with top speeds often associated with more than 100 miles per hour in fast service, although many accounts vary depending on the source and track conditions. It had no manual or automatic gearbox. Operation depended on the throttle, the reverser, and careful control of power. The big issue was its tendency to slip its drivers if the engineer opened the throttle too aggressively. With power split between 2 driving sets, the T1 could be fast and smooth, but it also demanded a light hand and real experience. Visually, it was spectacular, with long streamlining, a sloped nose, and an advanced look for the 1940s. In the shops, however, the story was less romantic. The whole design was complex, maintenance was demanding, and performance depended heavily on fine-tuning. The T1 became one of the most debated locomotives in American history. Some believe it was treated unfairly because of poor maintenance and improper operation. Others see it as too sophisticated for the brutal routine of railroad service. Either way, it became known as a brilliant, temperamental machine that was hard to love day after day. And if the T1 already divided opinions, the next one tried to reinvent passenger trains and became an even more visible disappointment. EMD Aerotrain. When passenger trains started losing ground, the EMD Aerotrain appeared as a promise of fast and affordable renewal. Launched in 1955 in the United States by General Motors' Electromotive Division, it was designed to look modern, cost less to operate, and attract passengers who were moving to cars, buses, and airplanes. The locomotive used a 12-cylinder diesel engine, the 12567C, producing about 1,200 horsepower. The system was diesel-electric, without a traditional manual or automatic gearbox. The diesel engine drove a generator, and that electricity powered the traction motors. Top speed was around 100 miles per hour, although real-world performance depended heavily on the line and the train set. Traction came through the locomotive's powered trucks, with conventional railroad suspension. The big problem was the full train set. The passenger cars were light, low, and, based on concepts borrowed from bus construction, which seemed good for saving money, but produced an uncomfortable ride with vibration and a fragile feel on rough track. From the outside, the Aerotrain stood out with its rounded nose, low profile, and train of tomorrow appearance. Inside, however, many passengers did not find the comfort they expected. Instead of railroad luxury, the experience could feel like a bus riding on rails, and that did not sit well with people who still associated train travel with roomy seats, quiet interiors, and stability. Only a small number were built, and the project was rejected by railroads in a short time. Even preserved as a historic piece, the Aerotrain became known as a good-looking idea that failed at the most important detail, convincing the people who rode in it. And if this lightweight train already disappointed by trying too hard to be modern, the next locomotive was so large and exaggerated that it almost seemed to challenge the rails themselves. PRR T1. Before it ever proved its value in daily service, the PRR T1 was already attracting attention as a showcase of railroad power. Introduced in 1939 in the United States by the Pennsylvania Railroad, it was built at the Altoona Works to impress the public at the New York World's Fair and show how far steam power could go in size, speed, and presence. Its steam engine had 4 cylinders, a 6-4-4-6 wheel arrangement, and a duplex system that divided power between 2 sets of driving wheels. Estimated output was above 6,000 horsepower, with top speeds often associated with numbers above 100 miles per hour, although speed claims around this locomotive are still debated. It had no manual or automatic gearbox. Control came from the throttle, the reverser, and the engineer's ability to apply power carefully. Traction came through the 2 driving sets, but the locomotive's enormous size created a serious problem. It was too long for many curves, switches, platforms, and railroad structures. Visually, the S1 was monumental, with streamlining designed by Raymond Loewy, an elegant front end, a long body, and a massive presence. It looked more like an exhibition piece than a daily workhorse. But in real service, that size became a limitation. It was heavy, hard to fit into the network, and too complicated to operate freely. The S1 became a symbol of ambition without practicality. It impressed almost anyone who saw it, but it ended up restricted, not very useful, and quickly surpassed by more realistic solutions. It proved that a locomotive can be too grand for the very railroad system it was supposed to serve. And if this giant already seemed hard to justify, the next one pushed technical exaggeration to a point that almost defied common sense. Soviet AA-20. The Soviet AA-20 was born from a simple, heavy, and dangerous idea: put as many driving wheels as possible under one steam locomotive. Created in 1934 in the Soviet Union by the Voroshilov Locomotive Works, it came from a period when the country wanted to display industrial strength and build machines capable of hauling gigantic freight loads. It used a 2-cylinder steam engine with a 4-14-4 wheel arrangement, an extremely rare configuration that was almost absurd for normal operation. It had 7 coupled driving axles, a large contact area with the rails, and high tractive effort estimated at more than 90,000 pounds, above 40 tons of starting force. Like every steam locomotive, there was no manual or automatic gearbox. Power was controlled by the throttle and reverser. But the problem was built into the design itself. With so many rigid driving axles in a row, the AA-20 had enormous difficulty taking curves, wore down rails and wheels, and required very well-prepared track just to avoid becoming an operational nightmare. Visually, it was intimidating. Long, heavy, and carrying a massive row of driving wheels, it looked like it had been built to crush any freight train in front of it. But that brutal presence hid a basic flaw. In railroading, power has to work with flexibility. Without proper articulation, its size became the enemy of its own efficiency. Only one AA-20 was built, and it entered history as one of the most poorly resolved locomotives ever placed on rails. It was powerful on paper, impressive in photographs, but not practical in real railroad service. And if this Soviet machine already showed how too many wheels can become a problem, the next one tried to be so different that it became one of the strangest and most rejected experiments in railroad history. Schienenzeppelin. No machine on this list looks as far outside the railroad norm as the Schienenzeppelin. Created in 1930 in Germany by engineer Franz Krukenberg, it was not a traditional locomotive in the classic sense, but an experimental rail vehicle powered by a propeller, built to prove that the rails could support a radically different kind of machine. Its engine was a 12-cylinder BMW unit, originally connected to aviation use, producing around 600 horsepower. Instead of sending power to driving wheels like a normal locomotive, it spun a large rear propeller. There was no conventional railroad gearbox, no electric traction, and no steam drive. Propulsion came from the air pushed by the propeller, while the wheels mainly guided and supported the vehicle on the rails. The suspension was light by railroad standards, and the body used aluminum construction to reduce weight. The Schienenzeppelin reached around 143 miles per hour in testing, an astonishing number for 1931. Visually, it was impossible to ignore. A pointed nose, aerodynamic body, low profile, and a huge propeller in the back, creating a scene that looked more like a laboratory experiment than a passenger solution. But that was the big problem. The exposed propeller was far too dangerous for stations, platforms, switching areas, and places where people were nearby. On top of that, the vehicle could not pull passenger cars in a practical way, had limited use, and depended on very specific conditions to make sense. It was fast in testing, but not very useful as real rail transportation. The Schienenzeppelin entered history as one of the most famous and controversial rail machines ever created. It broke records, captured global attention, and still looks impressive in old photographs. But it also proved that not every fast idea is a good operating idea. In the end, it was dismantled, and its reputation became locked in that exact contrast. Brilliant as an experiment, problematic as a real train. At the end of this journey, it is clear that these locomotives were not hated simply because they were strange or different. They became infamous because they tried to go beyond the ordinary, but ran into high costs, difficult maintenance, excessive fuel use, poor comfort, or limited usefulness in real railroad service. From the loud turbine-powered Union Pacific GTEL to the propeller-driven Schienenzeppelin, each one showed that power, speed, and impressive looks are not enough. On the rails, a machine has to be reliable, practical, and worth operating every single day. Now tell me in the comments, which of these locomotives did you already know? Which one do you think was judged too harshly? And which one deserves the title of the biggest railroad disappointment in history? If you enjoy this kind of content, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell. It helps the channel a lot because it shows YouTube that this video is relevant and helps this story reach more people who love incredible machines. I'll see you in the next video.